Now I would request Mr. John Cabeca, our guest of honor, to please come on the podium and share his valuable viewpoints to the audience. So let's welcome Mr. John Cabeca.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully I'm audible. Great. It's really a pleasure. I know it's Saturday, so first I just want to thank everybody for coming out on a Saturday. I'm delighted to be here and to have the opportunity to join all of you on the series of important discussions that we're going to have today. I truly commend NASCAP for providing a forum for industry to government interactions and for convening this dialogue to inform policy and strategy between our two countries, to promote international trade, and to help facilitate a favorable business climate in India and between our countries. And also, I just want to welcome the others on the dais, and Mr. Raghavendraji, it's good to see you again, and I see Vivek from OPPI. So nice to see everybody, and looking forward to joining you today on throughout today's program. So I want just a few minutes to talk about the relationship between the U.S. and India. And I hopefully you all agree that our ties are very strong. And as Mr. Raghavendraji mentioned, next week India celebrates its 75th anniversary of independence, and it's also coincides with 75 years of diplomatic relations and a trusted partnership between India and the United States. We are two of the world's leading democracies and two of the world's largest economies, powered by innovative spirit and our people. The growth in our economic ties has been extraordinary. The United States is India's largest trading partner, and India the 9th largest trading partner of the United States. Despite the impact of the pandemic, bilateral U.S.-India trade in goods and services jumped from $120 billion in 2020 to almost $160 billion in 2021. Further, the United States remained India's largest trading partner, with exports of goods and services to the United States worth over $102 billion. Most major U.S. firms have made significant investments and operations in India, making the United States also India's largest source of foreign direct investment. An expanding number of Indian companies also have similarly found the United States to be a welcoming destination for trade and investment. Foreign direct investment projects were largely in the areas of software, information technology, services, business services, pharmaceuticals, industrial equipment, and other sectors as well. And the U.S. foreign direct investment into India was valued at over almost $42 billion in 2020. And we talked about, Sir spoke in his comments about the investments and that U.S. companies are investing in India, and that couldn't be more true as evidence from the information here. But I wanted to give an example. There was several months ago, there was front page news about a U.S. company investing $20 million in a new manufacturing facility here in India. And I happened to be speaking to that U.S. company shortly thereafter, and they shared with me that they really wanted to invest $200 million. And yes, it is an attractive landscape. There's so much potential here. There's a tremendous amount of momentum. But still, even though we're seeing a lot of investments coming from the U.S., I think the potential for more investments is significantly greater if there are improvements in the areas that we're talking about today, specifically with the protection and efficient enforcement of intellectual property rights. So it's also to note that many of these industries that are investing are industries that we call IP-intensive industries. As many U.S. industries keep innovating, it's important to underscore the importance for companies to reinvest revenues into research and development, to improve on their existing products, or bring new products and services to the market. So companies that do this in the US, we call IP-intensive industries, and we've had a series of studies that we've done over the past 10 years to track how much of the US economy relies on and depends on these IP-intensive industries. And the most recent data I have is from 2019, and this report was just released this spring of 2022, but it shows in the latest IP and the US economy report showed that 127 IP-intensive industries in sectors such as manufacturing, wholesale, retail trade, professional, technical management, and administrative services accounted for $7.8 trillion of the US gross domestic product, which is over 41% of our entire GDP economy. So it is tremendous. And the intersection between innovation, research, and competitiveness, it's all very much interrelated. And having a strong, vibrant ecosystem requires more than, it requires a holistic approach in many ways. And this interrelation is one area where we work very closely with India. And my role in India, as well as my counterparts in posts around the world, focus very much on this. So I thought I would just take a moment to talk about the IP Attaché program. So I'm the intellectual property counselor here in India, but I actually cover 8 countries in South Asia. There are 13 colleagues that cover specific regions around the world. All of these are functions of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, where we work very closely with our host governments throughout our countries and the regions where we work on 3 primary things. The first is the government-to-government work that we do every day, where we work here in India on sharing best practices, providing technical cooperation, working together on updating laws. The U.S. also provides comments on any laws, regulations, or guidelines that might relate to intellectual property. And we also monitor and work with other ministries throughout the country that have equities in IP. And I was just recently trying to come up with a list just in our own system of how many US agencies have equities in IP. And it's somewhere around 30 or 40, I've kind of lost track. But it is tremendous. You see that many of our own government's departments have efforts to promote innovation, have efforts to promote women in entrepreneurship, have a lot of different aspects of, even if you think of defense, have a lot of different aspects that touch on and relate to IP. So we work very closely in coordinating them, and then we also share our best practices with our host governments on these things as well. The second pillar of our work is the work that we do in advocating on behalf of those wishing to enter the foreign markets in our host country. So here in India and throughout South Asia, we help US stakeholders understand the IP landscape, understand the judicial system, and help guide them in the differences between our systems so that they don't fall victim to these distinctions. And I think if you're aware of the patent system, the disclosure requirements are very different. If you have a disclosure prior to filing in the US, that's okay if it's within a year, but that's not okay here in India and other jurisdictions around the world. So we try to educate our stakeholders on those types of things as they look to enter and invest in India as a source for expanding their own business interests. And the third pillar of the work that we do is on advancing IP education, IP awareness, and the respect for intellectual property. And we do this a variety of different ways in partnership with industry organizations. We actually do some of this government to government in helping to educate customs and police officials on why intellectual property and the enforcement of IP is important. But we also work throughout the innovation ecosystem on all the different types of intellectual property at all levels, from secondary schools all the way up into academic institutions, working with startups, working with small, medium-sized enterprises, and also working with large entities as well. So we work throughout the innovation ecosystem in helping to work together to raise and promote awareness of intellectual property. And the other thing I'd like to underscore is, because this has actually been quite rewarding for me in my 2.5 years here in India, is we also go into villages and work with artisans and help them understand where they don't have a lot of access to information, to help them understand the basics of IP, but how their handicrafts or handloom products could benefit from brands or geographic indications, and to help guide them along those ways. And again, bringing resources here in India along with us to help support their efforts. So, but all that said, we still have much to do, and our economic relationship still has much room to grow. We welcome the reconvening of the U.S.-India Trade Policy Forum, which we call the TPF, which our last ministerial was in November of last year. And that focused on issues including market access issues, touched on intellectual property, good regulatory practices, digital trade standards, and several other topics that were discussed under the TPF. And we continue to sustain that momentum this year at the working group level, and looking forward to holding the next trade ministerial by the end of 2022. And you may have heard from Mr. Raghavendraji when he mentioned some of the things that were highlighted in the Special 301 report. These, I just want to underscore that these are very complex issues. These are issues that we take years discussing together. And so we have to be careful not to oversimplify them and to understand that they are complex. Our focus is one that really focuses on trying to help and guide, not so much dictate. We're here to help support India's efforts to strengthen and improve and enhance its intellectual property regime. We are not here to say, do it our way. That doesn't work. So with respect to the TPF, I digress. These discussions are led by the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, USTR, which is the same organization that coordinates globally each year on the Special 301 report, which is the topic of today's discussion. The Special 301 report reflects the outcome of an annual review based on hundreds, if not thousands, of comments we receive from stakeholders and governments from around the world and from industry organizations. In this annual review of the global state of intellectual property rights and enforcement. The review reflects the United States' resolve to encourage and maintain enabling environments for innovation, including effective IP protection and enforcement in markets worldwide, which benefit not only the U.S. exporters, but the domestic IP-intensive industries in those markets as well. The report identifies a wide range of concerns that limit innovation and investment. And a few examples of the report's areas of focus, and I won't speak specifically to India. I think you can read the report and come to your own conclusions, but just at a higher level, because we do this for many countries with our trading, that we have trading relationships around the world. But the few areas of focus for the report is to highlight where there's a deterioration in the effectiveness of IP protection and enforcement, where there have been reported inadequacies in trade secret protection in countries around the world, as well as an increasing incidence of trade secret misappropriation, the continuing challenges of copyright piracy and the state of counterfeit trademarked products on the internet, additional market access barriers that appear to impede access to healthcare and copyrighted and protected content, and then the ongoing systemic IP enforcement issues at a country's borders and in many markets around the world. So through our Special 301 report, this helps us to focus our engagement on these issues and looks forward to constructive cooperation with our trading partners that are identified in the report to help improve the environment for authors, brand owners, and inventors around the world. This is something that I'm also very deeply committed to doing here in India, One, since my arrival here, I've been very pleased to have a great working relationship with the relevant ministries on IP and those other ministries that have equities on intellectual property. But one highlight was the signing of a USPTO DPIIT Memorandum of Understanding, which provides a forum for us to discuss sharing of international best practices, providing technical cooperation on all the different forms of intellectual property, different ways of enforcement, and also talking about other regimes, like help ways that the U.S. can share its experiences with its evolution with its own trade secret regime, and things along those lines. So it really does cover the gamut, and it's been something that we've been very closely working with DPIIT and with the IP office here in India on. That said, as you all know, our economies and marketplaces are increasingly global and innovation-driven. They are powered by knowledge, creativity, and technology, each of which is supported by and warrants robust IP protection and enforcement. As the relevance of intellectual property rights has only grown exponentially in today's increasingly global digital age, the need for entrepreneurs and creators, as well as government agencies, to recognize the significance of intellectual property rights and adopt strong IP protection and enforcement strategies is even more crucial. Adding to this are the complexities resulting from the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which brought fundamental changes to the digital world, accelerating the shift to online platforms, digitalization, as well as an upsurge in IPR infringement activities online, primarily of pirated content. The Indian Parliament, in their review of the IP landscape here in India, has also identified a comprehensive list of IP reforms for the Indian government. They have raised enforcement of IP to combat counterfeiting and piracy as a key reform recommendation for the Indian government. In June 2022, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce released its recommendations on the promotion and regulation of e-commerce in India, and then which is a follow-on report from last summer's report from the Parliamentary Standing Committee on the IPR regime in India. These two reports generally, by the parliamentary committees, they generally expressed concern on the prevalence of counterfeit products and noted that the unhindered presence of such products negatively impacts the revenue of genuine manufacturers and may also act as a deterrent in innovation. I won't go into all of their recommendations. I think one report was 167 pages, but I encourage you to read it if you haven't. But I do want to highlight just a few high-level takeaways from the parliamentary reports. They stressed the need for capacity building by enforcement agencies on IP laws, including strengthening of IPR cells and state police forces. They also stressed the need to ensure on-ground implementation of stringent IP legislations with stronger interdepartmental collaboration on IP crimes for effectively curbing offenses such as counterfeiting and piracy. They also encouraged the government of India to consider establishing a central coordination body on IP enforcement. They recommended enacting specific legislation to curb counterfeiting and piracy to help restrain the growing menace of such IP crimes in India. And these are just some takeaways that specifically dealt with enforcement and piracy and counterfeiting, but there were many more proposed by the Parliament. And I know that the government of India is actively looking at these recommendations and through my role here, where I can provide international best practices and sharing of our own experiences on these things, I welcome doing that as well. So as in closing, so perhaps I just leave it there. So in closing, while we continue to work together, I look forward to doing what I can do to help support these efforts, among others, to encourage a strong and vibrant innovation ecosystem. In fact, we've already held numerous IP enforcement programs with customs and police officials throughout the country and even throughout the region. And we are working with our Indian partners here to expand these opportunities going forward. I look forward to being here with you today and to hearing from all of the esteemed speakers here. Thank you very much for inviting me, and have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John Cabeca. Thank you for your valuable viewpoints.